Greetings, my friends. Welcome to the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with yours truly, Dr. India White. I'm super thrilled to be here with you, rockstar leaders across the nation, across the globe. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you're having a wonderful Thursday, that things are just working out for you. I want to start our show first with some announcements. Of course, I want to remind you that the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with Dr. India White will be featured on the X Factor EDU network that hosts many different podcasts on there. So thank you, Dr. Matthew Joseph and the tribe for that. Please make sure you check out the X Factor EDU network. Also, this podcast will be featured on Spotify, so you can definitely find it there as well. Also, I would love for you to follow me whenever you get a chance on social media. My Facebook is Miss India White. LinkedIn is The India White. Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach. Instagram is Indie238. YouTube is India White 123, and TikTok is Dr. India White, and Threads is Indie238. Yes, and I also wanted to remind you guys to check out my new Grit Mini Workshop whenever you get a chance. It's a grassroots workshop, and it's called How to Harness Grit to Help Students Thrive. Go to grassrootsworkshops.com to check it out. Now, I hope to see some of you guys across the nation at various conferences. I love speaking for many of you, and I also love seeing you, hugging your necks and getting, just that fresh love together. So with that said, I have an upcoming event at the Savas Conference coming up at the end of this month. Super happy to be a keynote there. Thank you, Savas, for being amazing rock stars. I also will see you guys in Florida at the FCTM conference in Orlando. I will hope to see many of you guys at the Camps Conference in July. I'll be doing some featured sessions there. NCTM, I will be speaking there. Very honored to be a major speaker on the list. Also, NCTM, I will be there among many of you, just ready to receive you. And ICTM, I will be a featured speaker there. There are more events coming up, so thank you to everyone for the platforms and for the opportunities. I also wanted to remind you guys, I have started some new Grit workbooks, Facebook groups. So it's Grit's WB Facebook group, and you can find like Grit workbook for teachers, Grit workbook for leaders, Grit workbook for administrators, Grit workbook group for students, and there's the new one that I just launched, Grit workbook group for parents, which also aligns with my new launch of the Grit workbook for parents, because we need parents on board to help us to remain gritty and to meet us halfway, right? And so thank you so much for allowing me to come on and talk about that. But I really want to get talking about someone who I just look up to, who this is a phenomenal leader nationwide. Now, some people, they come to the table and it's like they talk a good talk, but maybe the works aren't as many, or they put up a good front, but there's just not a lot of depth to them. Well, this guest on the Grit and Equity podcast, I must say that is definitely not the case. This is a leader in our ranks. I think that she is a rock star mentor, leader, professor, teacher, and I am not going to shy away from giving her credit. And before, I really just kind of go in, I want to just introduce to you guys a phenomenal leader, a newly elected NCTM Board member. For those that don't know what NCTM is, that's National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. She is a newly elected board member. She also is the former president of Benjamin Banneker Association. She's a member of Black Women in Math, and she is also a former TED speaker, just like myself, but she actually was kind of paving the way for people like me to get on the stage. So with that said, I want to bring to this wonderful platform now, Dr. Shelly Jones. Thank you so much, Dr. Shelly Jones, for joining me. Oh my goodness, what an honor.
Ooh, hello there.
Oh
Dr.
my goodness.
White, thank you for having me on
Yes.
Grit Equity.
Yes. I am so honored to have you on this podcast. What a perfect fit. What a high honor. Thank you so much for the work that you do. And for those that don't know you, see, I am honored to at least rub shoulders with you. Can you talk to us a little bit about yourself? Tell the audience, who are you?
Oh, well, I started as a middle school mathematics teacher And actually, before that, I was a computer programmer, but I really fell in love with teaching. So I was a middle school teacher teaching math. And then I was an administrator for several school districts. And then I went on back to school, got a PhD in math ed, and I absolutely loved that. So I did professional development for some time at Wesleyan University and with PIMS, the Project to Increase the Mastery of Math and Science. So that's my thing. And now I am a full professor, the first African-American full professor at Central Connecticut State University in the math department, specifically in the math department. And I am math ed. So we have math ed and math in our department, actuarial, data science, etc. And so I teach math methods to elementary majors, elementary undergrads, and also graduate level classes in math and STEM.
You are very gritty, and this is wonderful. Wow. How did you get started on your journey when it came down to knowing this is my purpose? I want to give back. I want to help. How did you get started? Because you just said that you teach so many different backgrounds in math. I mean, you have led the way. I mean, fully through not just teaching in the K-12 space, but then leading as an administrator and then going into being a professor like you are today. You were so gritty. How did you get started on this journey? Like, what made you say, okay, I know this is my purpose. This is it. I'm going after it.
Well, in high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I did well in school and I persevered. I was gritty for sure. And it was something that I actually liked, but I just had a passion for learning. I'll start there. And I think when you have that passion, you can be gritty. Anyway, so I had that passion. I went on to college. Like I said, I was a computer science major. I finished with that. And I worked for Ma Bell, we used to call it in the old days. And anyway, and then US West. And I liked programming, but I didn't love it. And I think you really have a passion for something. What I did find that I fell in love with was teaching others in my space at US West how to actually code, right? So back then, when I started teaching others, I said, well, I actually like this. So I went back to school for my master's in education, and I had a lot of math because I was actually computer science and computer engineering. So I had a lot of math. And although I always liked math, I wasn't really sure that I could be a math teacher. And so going back to school helped me to get the confidence to do that. And then I will say this as well is, when you have a passion and when you begin to do the work that you love to do, other people will see it. And people saw me and they said, well, we have this opportunity in Illinois. Let's see if she wants to do it. And I was asking, I was like, yes. So you got to have some yeses in there. So I wasn't really sure about it, but I went. So I went. It was just an actual trip that we went to learn about an NSF program that was going on there. They had received a grant, and I really loved it. It was called Pump Algebra. And from there, somebody on that trip saw me and said, hey, would you like to get a PhD? You can come back to school. You can move to Illinois for a while. Yes. And we'll pay for it. And so I wasn't really sure about that, but the fact that I was going to have it paid for, I was like, this is an opportunity. But I had a young daughter, and they said, listen, we have family housing. You can do this. And so I would say to young people is sometimes you do have to take that chance, because that was a chance of a lifetime. And even though I had a young daughter, my family was behind me and they said, do it. And so I went off to Illinois State University, and there you go with my PhD. And from there on, I loved it. Joining organizations like NCTM and the Benjamin Banneker Association, I felt I had a village, I've been reading your stuff, India, so I'm pulling out some of those themes that you have, right? So I had that village, and that's really how I got started.
Yeah. Well, this is beautiful. Thank you so much. And I kind of want to get into your story, your journey with NCTM, and then being the president of Benjamin Banneker Association. I mean, these are some big opportunities. And even when you were, going to be the NCTM board member, it's like all of these opportunities have just fallen in your lap. And I know that you probably had your plate already really full, but you are so determined and resilient to continue to pay it forward. And you've always emulated passion and purpose. And so you were speaking about people taking the chance and pursuing opportunities through grit. So how did you know that this was the perfect opportunity for you? For instance, becoming, a former president of Benjamin Banneker Association, joining NCTM, and then being a board member. Like, what was that in you that said, I need to go for that. I need to pursue. I think I'm the one for the job.
Dr. White, excuse me, it was sort of a stepping stone. So like I said, I did a lot of work in professional development at Wesleyan University. And I learned what that meant. And I learned how to be a leader, right? So I was in that space of going to professional development myself to learn how to become a leader so that I could provide professional development to other leaders and to educators in the classroom. So I started there. I never left NCTM. So when I got my PhD at Illinois State University, it was something that they had us do. So even as students, they had us attend NCTM meetings as well as other meetings. And I never left. I found a family there, like I said, a village. And you really have to find your people. You have to find find people who have some of the same values that you have and some of the same expectations that you have in vision. And so with NCTM and the Benjamin Banneker Association, especially with the BBA, which we call the Benjamin Banneker Association, we are really about equity and about leveling the playing field for all students, but especially for African American students, right? And so by falling into those spaces and doing the work, so although I'm in these leadership roles, there was a lot of work, decades of work that went into it. And so really, I have to tell you the truth. I was where I needed to be to fall right into that leadership role of president of the Benjamin Banneker and now as board member for NCTM because I had done a lot of the work. The Banneker is an affiliate organization for NCTM. So by learning how to be a leader at the state and at the national level with BBA, then I was able to now move on to NCTM in that international space of being a leader for math ed.
That's powerful. And you're the perfect person for it. And, you were talking about how Benjamin Banneker really promotes like equity within the space, in particular for African-American Black learners, which I think is powerful. And I think it's wonderful that we are always all inclusive, even at the national level, and that this is this is the avenue as to how all teachers of all backgrounds can become a part of really understanding how to teach, children of African-American descent, Black students, how to really implement equitable practices. And so with that said, I wanted to ask you a question and shift it a little bit and talk a little bit more about equity. How can teachers remain gritty and resilient while implementing equitable practices with some of the work that, some of your findings and, some nuggets that have worked for you?
So I like that you asked, how can teachers remain gritty? Because even though we want our students to be gritty, right? And I'm just going to give the whole, idea about grittiness, and that I talked about myself having a passion, right? We want kids to have a passion for math, but first we have to work with the teachers to make sure, first of all, they have a passion for what they're doing. So nobody becomes a teacher because someone makes them become a teacher. Most teachers have a passion for teaching, have a passion for children, right? But also the perseverance. That's what gets hard for teachers, is that we have to persevere through those first couple of years, first of all, because I work with pre-service teachers. So those first couple of years are tough. So we have to work through that. And that's just getting to know how to teach. But in specific with math, I believe teachers have to then know how to reach every student and get the student to believe in themselves, to believe in the fact that they can do it, to have the confidence, right? And so if teachers are able to persevere through that, that might mean getting professional development for themselves.
Right.
Because if you've never had what we say is culturally relevant teaching yourself, then you won't know how to do it. If you've never had it yourself as a student, then you won't know how to do it. And we actually ask teachers that. When was the first time you experienced culturally relevant teaching? And many teachers will say either they haven't or they didn't experience it until higher ed. And so once teachers are able to do those kinds of things in terms of creating kind of creating relationships, authentic relationships with their students, learning about their students, then I believe that they can then be gritty themselves because they can persevere in the profession.
This is powerful. Now, Dr. Shelly, so I'm going to pause really quick and share my screen because, see, Dr. Shelly is very humble, and you guys would never know that she also has done a TED Talk. And so I want to just kind of feature her here. Can y'all see this? So this is her TED Talk that she did on culturally relevant pedagogy and mathematics. And the reason why, so this was 7 years ago. And so kudos to you, Dr. Shelly. I know that you are very humble and you're not going to put yourself out there, but I am going to do you the justice. So,
and thank you.
So I just want you guys to
Jesse
see this,
Turner
and
John Fauché,
I hope you can
for inviting me
hear it,
today,
or
and I thank you all.
I don't know if you can hear it or not, but if not, I'm just gonna play a little bit of the subtitles.
Math is cultural. That's not a question.
And so she's talking about here.
Let's do an experiment.
A show, and
this is the scenario.
She's saying that it's an experiment.
I'm in Otavalo,
this is a scenario.
Ecuador.
This is in Ecuador, and so she's going to really break down how math is cultural.
But I want 6
now
images.
Because I have her
so
here.
I want everyone in the audience.
Yeah, I could flip through this. Right, I'm going to flip through maybe just a little bit. So here, Gloria Latson Billings talks about culturally relevant teaching, and it's a pedagogy that empowers students. Now, I'm going to stop sharing only because I have the TEDxer with me, so it makes sense to really ask the experts about your TED Talk on culturally relevant teaching. Break it down to us. See, guys, in order to get approved for a TED Talk, your work has to be vetted. You have to go through the TED platform and so many other things. So the fact that this has been up for 7 years, it wasn't flagged, it has been honored, it has been shared. You've helped so many people. I need you to talk with this audience, and congratulations, by the way. I need you. You are the queen of this category. So I need you to talk with us about that TEDx talk and about the work that you've done around culturally relevant teaching and culturally relevant pedagogy.
Sure. So back in 2013, my colleagues and I wrote a chapter, Lou Matthews and Yolanda Parker, and we wrote a chapter in the brilliance of Black children in mathematics. Beyond the numbers and toward a new discourse, because we kept hearing about the achievement gap. And we wanted to say, forget about the gap for a while. Let's talk about what the assets are that students have. Let's start with their strength rather than what they don't know. And so we wrote a chapter in the book about culturally relevant, cognitively demanding math tasks. And also, in addition to that, I do a lot of work with cultural relevance with my in-service teachers. So those teachers that come back for their masters. And one of the things I do is talk about how math is cultural, and I help them to see why. Because a lot of times we will say, well, math is math, math is numbers, math is shapes, math is patterns. But there's so much more to math than just those things. Because when you talk about numbers and shapes, and when you talk about patterns, you're basically talking about culture, because cultures have patterns, they have fabrics, they have box braids and cornrows, because Gloria Gilmer found mathematics in Black women's hairstyles. So there's all of these things where math is connected, and we want teachers to understand that so that they can pull in students, community knowledge, student interest, so that students won't say, well, when will I ever use this? They'll see when they will use it through the context that we use in our math lessons. And so that is really where that comes from. And so that TEDx talk was to talk about how math is cultural, even from the very beginning of time. People don't realize it, but just how we show the number 8, we can show 4 and 4. You might not be able to see my fingers, or 5 and 3. And there's different ways that different cultures will show 6, will show 8 with hand gestures.
True.
And that's where I started on that particular TED Talk.
Wow. Well, that's very impressive. And the thing is, there's so much heat around culture, equity, and all this, right? People don't know how to really approach it, how to express it, what's going on. And so I do have a question about staying in the lens of culturally responsive pedagogy, culturally responsive teaching, and your typical math teacher. And I kind of want to shift it a little bit towards our European descent teachers. Shout out to all you rock stars. Why? Because the data shows that we have about 80% of teachers of European descent, Caucasian, wonderful, phenomenal. But my biggest thing that I've seen on the field is there has been a question of how do I then implement culturally responsive teaching practices in the classroom to where I can be comfortable with the culture of students of different backgrounds and teach math in a way that is culturally relevant, but also gets to the point, so that it's not just all culture and no math, but that there's like an even keel, a good balance. What advice do you have for teachers that are trying to, explore culture within the math and still feel comfortable with culture while also implementing mathematical practices in the classroom?
Sure. So I think that, first of all, students need to see themselves in the mathematics, right? And you can do that in a lot of different ways. You can highlight diverse mathematicians, right? We know about Pythagoras and Gauss, and we know about mathematicians like that. They get all the love. But there's other mathematicians like Benjamin Banneker, Katherine Johnson, John Urschel, that we could also highlight. That a student, John Urschel, happens to be a Black man, and he was a professional football player. Now he's a mathematician. Always actually been a mathematician, but now he does that for a living. So just highlighting people like that will help a student to see, oh, I can do that too. Representation is so important. So that's one way. Another way is to pull in information from students' lived experiences from their community, not just what they're interested in, which is great. They're interested in music and sports, but also some things from their community to empower them, to make them feel good about themselves. A lot of times we only hear about the negative in certain communities and about certain students. If they could see themselves in a positive light and connect that to math. Now, how do we do that? At a little bit at a time, right? And what you do is you find resources out there. I have a book, my colleagues and I have another book called Engaging in a Culturally Relevant Math Task. And we have lots of ideas there using children's literature, bringing in diverse children's literature so that teachers can start with a story and then pull the math out of it. Even if it's not a math story, that you won't believe all the math that you can find in children's literature. And so those are some of the ways: the context of the problem, the people who we highlight, the mathematicians we highlight, and even the cultural aspects like the hair braids. The hair braids, what we did with that was we use that to show that you can count consecutive numbers from 1 to whatever in a pattern. So I have 1, and then I have 2 rows. 1 plus 2 is 3. And then I have 3 rows. 1 plus 2 plus 3 is 6. And I keep going. And there's actually to that. But you can show how hair braids show that pattern. So there's a lot of little things. And I think it's just a matter of getting together with someone and looking things up. And little by little, you find these little lessons that you can pull in, just little by little.
And I think there's a fear also, like, what if we don't want to like offend or get any feathers ruffled from students? But what if it's offensive, or how do we do it to where we're not being offensive, or we're not being brash, or taking it wrong out of context, or possibly even getting canceled? I mean, people get canceled overnight for just little incidences that they did not mean to harm in. So how then do we convince people of various culture groups that are interested in teaching a specific culture, through the math context and the math lens? How do you help them with that? Where do they get started?
So I could say a couple of ways. One is ask students what matters to them. There was a teacher group that did that.
Wow.
Turner and Font. So Mrs. Font said, what are some things that are interesting to you or that you're concerned about? And based on that,
Mhm.
they chose one of the contexts, which was the overcrowding of their school. And the students were able to show that their school was overcrowded using math, using area, perimeter, and so forth. And so ask students what they're interested in and also what they're concerned about. So that's one way. Another way is ask colleagues, get a village. You don't know everything, you might not know every culture, but guess what? Ask students. Students will tell you if you ask them something, they'll be like, nah, miss,
Yeah.
don't do that. Don't do that. They will tell you. So also ask the students. So ask the students, look for things that are already out there. Look for resources that are already out there. And then also get your colleagues involved, your colleagues that might be more diverse, right? When I say more diverse, I just mean that when you grow up, a lot of times, many of us grow up in a certain cultural community, and we know that community, and then when we leave that community, I grew up in Bridgeport, Connecticut, right? A lot of Black people, a lot of Puerto Rican people. I went down to Atlanta, Georgia to Spelman College, a lot of Black people, but guess what? They were different. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, just
Yeah.
because they're Black doesn't mean we have the same culture. So there
Right.
were a lot of different cultures there because I was coming from a family that maybe was maybe more middle class, right? Whereas when I went there, there might have been some families there that were not middle class, they were upper class or whatever you want to call them, a higher SES. And so you sometimes you just have to learn. You
Yeah.
learn by asking, you learn by looking at the internet and at reputable resources. There's a
Wow.
lot out there that we can learn these days, way more than before.
Now listen, Dr. Shelly. So I know I've seen some of your work. I've read some of your work. Where can we find it now? I'm not going to allow you to sit humbly on my show. So I know you've had some work with the American Math Society, right?
Yes,
And have
AMS.
so AMS, you have some books on AMS, correct?
Yes, I
Would
do.
you know the titles?
Yes, it's so I have a book on the AMS bookstore. That's the American Mathematical
Yes.
Society. They are the publishers, and the book is called Women Who Count, and it's a book honoring African American women mathematicians, and it was inspired by Hidden Figures. So
Wow.
Women Who Count. And then the other book series that you had up is on Corwin, and in both of these situations, there are resources that you can that are complimentary. You just go
Amazing.
on and you can download the PDF.
Now that's amazing. You got published with Corwin. I have not been as lucky, but I think that it's a great platform that you got published on Corwin. So you guys can find the engaging and culturally relevant math tasks on the Corwin platform, and then the AMS bookstore. Women Who Count. Now, are these also on Amazon?
Yes, both of them are
Okay.
on Amazon as well.
Okay,
Yep. Yep.
excellent. And so this is phenomenal. I'm so honored. And so my thing is, for someone like you that is really leading the space of culturally relevant teaching, culturally responsive teaching, and things like that, what is your wish for just education
Oh,
in this
wow.
space? What is your wish?
Okay. I have a couple of wishes, but my wish is that we as educators would just take a step back and say what is best for students, right? And I know that testing is one of those things that we need to do because we need to gauge where we are. But we got to step back a little bit to say how much testing, and with the testing, what are we not doing? And I think one of the things we're not doing, especially in math, is we're not having kids see the joy and the wonder in math. Because mathematicians make lots of mistakes, and kids are definitely afraid of mistakes. And I understand it's because it's a culture of if you get a mistake, you're wrong, people laugh at you. We have to get a culture in our classroom where kids are helping each other. We want
Yes.
a culture in our classroom where students are helping each other and where all the students are positioned as able to do math, as doers of math, we say. I don't want to hear another teacher, and I've heard a teacher say this, so I'm not being
Yeah.
critical, but I don't want to hear another teacher say, "Oh, can one of the mathy ones, or can one of the math students
Wow.
answer this?" I've heard it. I've heard it. And so we have to be really careful about what we tell students, because their math identity relies on us as teachers, but also relies on the peers and the parents. So even when parents say, "I'm not good at math," it gets into kids' minds. And so we have to change the way students think about math and about who can do math and what math is for. So if we can
Wow.
do those things, then we will be doing a world of good for students.
Yeah. Wow. And so you're saying to change who can do math, and this is so imperative, because I remember even growing up, like I did not have any African American math teachers that I know of. I don't think I did. So it was tough for me to believe, that I could be a mathematician. And it was like, I don't know, like I joined Black Women in Math, which I know you remember as well. And so that was really neat to see that, we were out here,
Yes,
we were coming together. We're all like, doing these great things to help our nation. But, like you said, seeing themselves. So what about, how do teachers do that then? How do they create this space where students can start seeing themselves, especially your African American Black students? How can teachers that maybe they're not African American, they're not Black, how can they begin on that journey with helping students with their identity?
I think that they have to reach out to others to learn. They have to go to some sessions at NCTM or at their state NCTM affiliate. Mine in Connecticut is called Atomic, the Associated Teachers of Math in Connecticut. And in Connecticut, we actually have an equity framework. Don't be afraid of the word equity. I know, I understand in some states, there are some words that I call trigger words. And what are we afraid of? Let's just continue, to embrace all types of cultures and people. And when I say culturally relevant, it's not always about culture and ethnicity. I also want to dispel that belief. It's just about empowering students and making them feel good about themselves and in their ability to do math. And right now, we don't do that. When we focus on what students don't know, their deficits, they internalize that. And although we think we're helping them, what they begin to believe is they can't do it, because all they ever do is in remedial stuff.
It's the criticism. Yeah.
And, there's and there's research that shows when you give students enrichment, they will rise up to the occasion.
They will be ready.
Don't know their multiplication facts. Give them something. You know what? A student that loves football, I bet he or she knows their 7 tables.
Yeah. Yep.
So they know what they want to know. They know they wouldn't know the words to all the songs of all the people,
because they're passionate. Yeah.
They know how to memorize stuff. They know how to do stuff, but they're doing what they want to do. Yeah. They're learning what they want to learn. If it relates to them and gives them joy.
That part. And the thing is, we've got to learn how to connect their grit to the culture so that they can continue to persevere and want to be passionate about math. And I think that is a disconnect that we're starting to tackle together as a nation, as educators, is how do we tie in their culture to their grit to the content in the math book? Because if we can get that package, we will win. You know what I mean? And I think that what you're doing, it just speaks volumes of the impact that it's going to have. I'm so thankful that you have not sat dormant, but that you've been making a great difference, and that you're also, taking on other leaders like myself, and that we're all this big tribe together, just helping each other and cheering our students on, helping them to be gritty while also being culturally relevant for our students. And so I have another question before I let you go. What about
Dr. India, let me say one thing though about the gritty part is, in doing reading about your book that I've been reading, Equity Counts, and then other things that I've been reading. One of the things about grittiness is that passion. It has to be something that will allow you to persevere, meaning there has to be something about it that you like or that you really want to do. And if we don't change the context, that if we talk about 50 cantaloupes, don't no kid care about 50 cantaloupes.
Right.
So if we change the context so that it matters to students, I believe they can get more passionate about. If you can connect math to music, math to art, math to all kinds of things, we can do it. We just have to help each other. And sometimes it's pulling in some of the other disciplines in our schools. But I'm sorry, your last question.
This is so powerful. And I'm thankful you said that. We can do it. And like you said, we have to do this together. And so I want to now kind of talk with my beautiful European descent leaders who might still be a little bit hesitant, or they might say, I don't need equity, or I don't need culturally relevant. I teach a dominant class of, European descent students. There's nothing about culture, right? Which I've heard this. Yeah. And I need you to speak on this, because I need them to understand that even in a space where you're teaching maybe highly advanced gifted learners, there's still room for this work. So what advice do you have for a teacher that feels like, I don't need this?
Well, for one, there's not a whole lot of companies and jobs where it's going to be an all white crew, right? And so in many professions, you're working together. And so you have to learn how to collaborate. And also you have to learn, all students need to learn what others have done so that they can dispel some of the things that they may think. They may think that they're a superior group because they're the only group they know. But then if they stepped into a Black woman in math ed meeting, it would blow their minds, because they would say, oh, I didn't know. And that's why they need to know. Everyone needs to know about diverse cultures and inclusivity and all of that. So they need to know as well, because when they go out into the world, and I've had students to tell me this, students that came to me to be teachers, and they live in small communities. I live in Connecticut, where we have one of the widest gaps because of the SES status in certain towns. And they've come to me to say, I have never really been around Black people. Seriously.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I was told I really don't want to teach in that town because blah, 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 blah. And then when they go to that town, they're like, it's not even like that. I love working there. So it's something to help them as well. And that's the thing that we're not going to take away from you. We're going to add to you. We're going to add to you.
That's a powerful statement. We're not here to take away from you. And I think there's a fear and there's various things that have been said, maybe myths, I don't know. Maybe there is a little bit of that. Like, I don't know if I can trust a certain group or trust a certain, whatever. And so I'm happy to hear you say that we are welcoming. We have open arms. And that we do. I know that we do greater work together, and so I think this is wonderful that you're saying that. And so now, as we wrap up the show, Dr. Shelly, do you have any last minute nuggets that you would like to leave the audience about, having grit and equity in all that they do, especially in the space of education?
So what I would love for you to do is tell us what you're doing to help your kids get gritty, because they have to learn about it. It doesn't just happen. They don't learn how to persevere on their own. They have to learn about it. And I'm at Shelly M, as in Monica, at Shelly M Jones 1. And that's on X, formerly Twitter. So that's the space where I do a lot of my posting and engaging with educators, leaders, etc. So at Shelly M Jones 1. There you Excellent. Go. You got it right.
Okay. So we can follow you there for sure. So guys, please do not be a stranger. Dr. Shelly is available for speaking, consulting. She is an author. Please check out her work on Corwin and on the AMS bookstore, which is absolutely fantastic. And again, please just continue to join us as we are tackling these wonderful issues together as a village. And with that said, thank you so much, Dr. Shelly Jones, for joining us
again
on the Grit and Equity. Yes, this is a high honor to me. So thank you so much for joining us. And thank you all for tuning in to the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with Dr. India White. Please don't be a stranger. Feel free to visit me at www.india-white.com for, any follow-up after this show, or, you're wanting to be featured on the show and things like that. We are here for you. Check out the X Factor EDU network. And so with that said, guys, thank you so much again. And until next time, stay gritty. See ya.